So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the executive. The main item this morning is the proposed budget that we're going to recommend to full council in a matter of weeks or so. Can I bring apologies for absence from Councillor Harrison, who isn't with us in the room but is actually joining us online. So good morning, Michael. You're welcome. And also Councillor Peter Lacey and Councillor Paul Haslam. So can we move on, please, to the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of January? And can we just correct a small typo? I think, Mal, you're going to say what that mistake is, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just at paragraph 826 under the area committee feedback report, the second paragraph related to Skipton and Ripon. It refers to Engine Shed Lane in the Wensleydale link. That should read Engine Shed Lane, Wyvern Park, and remove the Wensleydale link. Thank you.
Can we change that, please? Yes. And then can I sign them as a true record, having made that amendment? Okay, see nods around the table. Thank you. So, does anybody have any declarations of interest, please? Gareth?
Yeah, just declare my usual, for which I've received a dispensation from the Standards Committee, and it relates to any discussion on second homes and second homes premiums and associated matter.
Thank you, Gareth. Anybody else got any declarations of interest? No. Move on then to public questions and statements. There are none. So that takes us to the main item, the discussion this morning. Item 5, the revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy. Going to turn to Gareth now to introduce it, but just before he does, can I just compliment all our officers for the amount of work that they've done to get to this point. Pages of information that we have before us. We might disagree when we get to full council about the implications of the budget, but nobody can say that we're not well prepared to actually make decisions on our forthcoming budget. So with that, Gareth, can I turn to you?
Thank you, Carl. Can I associate myself with the comments you've just made regarding the work that's been put in by our officers? And it isn't just the work, it's actually the way that this budget has been presented, and the skill at which it's been presented. I said to Gary earlier today, this is probably the best set of budget papers I've ever seen in terms of its legibility. It's clear, not that they were illegible previously, but I think we've got the knack now of presenting stuff in a way that members of the public, more importantly, but equally us, can understand. The hours that goes into this and the uncertainty that we've had to endure over the past couple of years, both from the previous government and this, made that task that much harder, coupled with local government reorganisation and pulling the systems together and the likes. And we know that's always going to be challenging. So a big whopping thank you, not just to Gary, but the team that work with him. So I'm going to be fairly brief because, of course, this is the one opportunity in the year that the Section 151 officer, i.e. Gary, has in terms of presenting what is effectively his report. Of course, it's done in conjunction with the leadership, but nonetheless, it is most certainly his report. If, for example, I'll just float this, I'm not suggesting that we do disagree on council tax levels, but I've always been keen to protect the professionalism and professional integrity of our officers. And if, for example, the steer from us had been, which it is not, I might add, not to increase council tax by, say, 5%, I'm using this to illustrate a point, I would have still expected and welcomed Gary and this team giving a professional view, and that's why it's so important that we have this stage in terms of budget setting, because they must be allowed to flourish professionally, and I know that they protect their professional integrity to the end, and quite rightly so. So with that, I think I'll just make 3 or 4 points on the background to how we've arrived at this point. If we take into account the fair funding review, the loss of the rural services grant last year, plus the net cost to this authority of the rise in employers' national insurance contributions, we are looking at a £43 million wallop. We also take into account the demand in people's services. As an example, there's £15 million alone being included for child placement. There's uncertainty over SEND funding, but with that, and there's a bit of hope there, I might add, but with that, we all know that the challenging demands of adults still remains. And also take into account our inflation. If we'd funded our spending power entirely by council tax, it would have equated to a 7% rise in council tax without any planned savings, I might add. Clearly, we can only fund it up to the maximum of 4.9. Let's, for ease, we'll call it 5, as the government have put that cap on, including the 2% social care. So you can see immediately the problem that we're facing. That's why we've got savings programmes of £56 million over the next 3 years, and why we are recommending the maximum council tax increase. Each 1% reduction in that council tax increase would add a further £5 million a year to the deficit. So play with that figure at your peril. I do understand how hard it is when we've got above inflation on the surface, headline inflation, council tax increases, but that's got to be balanced with the services that this authority provides, especially to those that need them most. We continue to support the local council tax reduction scheme and the likes. And we've done that right from the start of this council. In other words, we've prioritised support to those that need it most. And I'm very proud to do that. Every now and again, I'll be referring and comparing us to authorities just across the border. I know that a changed authority leadership has chosen to start charging the most vulnerable council tax in some shape or form. We have not done that. There is still 100% relief for those that most need it. And again, I'm very proud for us to continue that. Despite all that, we still face a £17 million shortfall next year, and that will rise to 28-29 to about £25 million. So there is still more work to be done. We hope to bring forward more savings that build upon the £68 million worth of local government reorganisation savings that we've planned or delivered so far. I'm going to take this opportunity to extol the virtues and benefits of local government reorganisation, because without it, that shortfall would have been £85 million next year, rising to £93 million in 3 years. Make no mistakes, local government reorganisation was financially necessary, and it's avoided this council being in the field of up to 74 councils that are seeking exceptional financial support up and down the country. That, coupled with a financial grip that we've displayed over many years has enabled us to overcome the £43 million worth of cuts. Finally, you'll see the papers do refer to our second homes premium. I must say that's probably one of the proudest policies that I've ever been involved in. I know it wasn't universally welcomed, and it's still not universally welcomed, usually by second home owners, I might add. But it has provided us a fairly substantial pot. And I think I'm right in saying that we are the only authority in the country that has reserved ring-fenced, if you like, albeit informally, at this stage while we are still able to, for use to support the effects of second home ownership. In fact, I think just very recently, the first development is beginning in Hunmanby, next door to one of the few councillors that's quite vociferous in his opposition to a second homes premium for the supply of low-cost social housing. So we can see the results of that beginning to come through. We'll contrast that with some of the rhetoric that we've heard from some political party members that were dead set against second homes premium. That particular political party, it's been of note, has started the process of introducing it to a council that they took control over this only this year. And again, our neighbour hasn't wished to overturn that policy, probably because they'd lose £3 million worth of income into their base. I think the message is, it's very easy to criticise, it's very easy to harp and carp from the sidelines, but when you're responsible for a budget, with the ramifications of that budget being on real people in the real world, political posturing must come second to pragmatism. With that, I think it's right that I hand over to Gary that will go through some of the more finer details and highlight some important legalities.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll go through some points. I think at some points it's very important that I bring to members' attention. So just to start off with, just building on Gareth's introduction, just to be clear, the budget that's set before you results in a £17 million deficit in 26-27, and that rises to 28-29 based upon a set of assumptions. And I'll return to that in my section 25 opinion. That's one bit where I'm actually going to read out some of that report to you, because I think it's really important that I do that and it's there on the record. That deficit over the 3 years will require £59 million worth of reserves unless further work's done to bridge the gap. That is manageable. For this council, that is a manageable position. I'm clear about that. But I don't recommend that we regard that as the destination. So we should look to do more work in the next 12 months plus to try and reduce that so that reserves can be used for one-off investments, because, as I repeatedly say, reserves are one-off funds, should be used for one-off investments and preferably to get returns on that investment to help bridge the revenue gap as well. As Gary said, there are some significant pressures across the board in this particular budget. And I was just saying to Richard that Gareth was saying it was the best budget report. So it's only taken me 13 years to get there on that. But it's actually, this year is the highest amount of growth we've put into a single budget. So there's £27 million worth of growth in this budget. There's some other adjustments in there, so you won't see that number 27 million specifically. But there is £27 million of growth been put into next year. And I'm just going to pick out some of the highlights on that, because I think it does tell you something about the state of the finances, not just in this council, but nationally. So £15 million extra has been put into children's services for high cost placements, £2 million for additional social workers because of caseloads, £1.5 million worth of educational psychologists because of caseloads on SEND. £5 million has been put into adult social care to deal with fair pay for care. That is in later years. And there's also a £1.5 million lost to environment as a result of car parking and property income in the Whitby Harbour and Scarborough Harbour, and the judgment that results in that having to be ring fenced for harbour purposes. So that does have on the general fund to the tune of about £1.5 million per annum. So all of that adds up, and £27 million in growth alone is a smidge over 5% in council tax by itself. And as Gareth said earlier, inflation equates to about 7% on council tax. So you can see, given that there is a government grant cut, given that inflation accounts for 7%, given that growth accounts for 5%, and given that you're capped at 5%, something has to give, savings have to be generated, and there's likely to be a deficit until such time as that can be worked through. The provisional finance settlement was disappointing for this council and resulted in an £11 million cash reduction. But when you add in the new funding that's provided, which has equal and opposite amount of commitments, the fair comparison is a £20 million reduction, which is the starting position for this council. And you'll see that set out in the report. And that is factual. The £11 million cash reduction is as per the information provided by government, so that we are clear that there is a cash reduction from government funding. However, whilst we've got a 3-year settlement from government, there's still a significant amount of uncertainty, as Gareth has said. The decisions around such things as SEND, reform of social care, further definition around the requirements on a national waste strategy, those things alone are likely to have a bigger impact on our bottom line than some of the changes that will be at the margins in that 3-year settlement. So there's still significant change that we need to factor in. And essentially that means being able to provide for scenarios and flex accordingly. So medium-term planning is still very much needed. So given that cash reduction, given the inflation, given the demand, the proposal is to increase council tax by 2.99% and to add 2% social care precept, which gives a total of 4.99%, which equates to an increase of £96.78 per annum for a Band D. It also proposes in the budget report, as Gareth said, to continue to apply the Second Homes Council tax premium. And I can confirm that the budget and the medium-term financial strategy continues to ring-fence all of the net proceeds 100% to deliver on the housing ambitions as was set out. I can also confirm, as Gareth indicated, that the budget does provide for a council tax reduction scheme, which largely continues as was beforehand, and that gives 100% relief to the most disadvantaged, as Gareth has indicated. We will continue to monitor that as we observe whether or not there are further cost of living pressures. So we will report to that on a quarterly basis. The budget also provides for a one-off £5 million investment on top of the growth, a £5 million investment in property maintenance. That's merely in response to the, again, quite high demand for some of the needs. From now that we've brought the 8 councils together, we are better understanding some of those properties. We will be putting more money into maintenance. We can see that some of those buildings desperately need that. As you know, we've had some significant property problems of late. I'll just pick on one recently, Richmond Pool. So these are the kinds of things that have cropped up more often than not. And so we need to put more money into that. But that's on a one-off basis. And that needs to be dovetailed with our revision on the capital strategy, property rationalisation and prioritisation in the public, a subject I'll come back to when we deal with the capital plan. If I can just refer members also in the report, you'll see that there is feedback on the consultation with the public. We got a good response to the Let's Talk Money campaign that our comms team led on, for which I'm grateful. Some of the headlines on that: 77% supported an increase in council tax, 45% supported council tax of 3% or more, plus 43% supported adult social care precept of 2% or more. So that's not 45% and the 43% added together. Those are from the same cohort. So there are more people who do not support that level of council tax than do support it, but there are still significant percentages who do support an increase in council tax. And as I said, 45% and then 43% at the levels that are consistent with the recommendation in this report. And as Gareth said, that is an officer recommendation. If I can just refer you, it's always important that we understand the consequences of the savings proposals in particular and other key decisions that are made in the budget report. And the quality and impact assessments are referred to in section 7 and will be made available to all members and as that goes forward to full council. So I'd encourage all members to review that and make sure that they understand the implications that arise from these decisions. What I would point out is that whilst there are significant savings, you'll see that there are a total of £56 million in savings in this report, and 28 million of those being new. Those have been discussed in members' seminars beforehand. The majority of them do not impact on frontline services. So this council is in a good position and a fortunate position because of LGR that is able to deliver a range of savings which have do not impact directly on the front line. There are some that do, but the majority of these have minimal impact on the front line, which helps in terms of that quality impact assessment. But nevertheless, I'd encourage members to read that. If I can just turn now to section 25 statement, and I'm actually going to just draw your attention to page 14 of the pack, where you've got the executive summary. And I'm not reading the whole thing, but I do want to just read paragraph 19 from there to make sure that everyone is clear about the kind of key headlines on this, because this is the annual statement that I'm required to make to you, and I want to have drawn to the attention of full council when it meets on February the 13th. So last year, the LGC, so the Local Government Chronicle, reported that the government was expecting up to 74 councils to apply for exceptional financial support for 26-27 in order to avoid issuing Section 114 notices. Just for members' information, a Section 114 notice is where the 151 officer is effectively saying the council is not able to balance its budget. So it's close to being, it can't be bankrupt, but it's not able to get its balanced budget, so it's in financial distress. So I'm pleased to report that the finances of the council are sufficiently robust that this is not the case in North Yorkshire. The significant savings proposals set out in this report, however, need to be delivered. In addition, further proposals to bridge the MTFS deficit need to be brought forward so they can be considered in next year's budget and medium-term financial strategy. As I said earlier, there remains uncertainty in a number of areas of government policy, notwithstanding the 3-year finance settlement for local governments. SEND reform may relieve some pressure, sorry, that's a typo, it says relive, it should say relieve some pressure in the council's budget, but details of the reform, including a timeline for implementation, will be required before an assessment can be made. A Section 114 notice is not foreseen in the near future, despite the significant reductions in government funding. Any inactivity over the next 2 years on further savings could, however, jeopardise this position, so the council should absolutely guard against complacency. So I, for one, will be making sure that we do work on the savings plans, and I hope that we have a further set of proposals this time next year, and we will also have better clarity on some of those government reform agendas. I then just draw your attention to the recommendations on pages 66 to 68. There are lots of them. I'm not going to dwell on any individuals, but I'm very happy to take questions on any of those. And I'd also want to draw your attention to the savings that are set out in Appendices B1. And as I said earlier, they're largely protecting frontline services, but the detail is set out in there. And I just confirm to members that there are no new savings in there that were not shared as part of informal discussions in member seminars in December. So there is a continuation. There is nothing new in there. So at that point, Chair, I'll just stop in terms of the revenue budget report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gary. Barry, I think you wanted to come in on one point.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to expand on the public sector equality duty that Barry mentioned previously, it's identified in paragraph 7.3, page 49 of the report. It's just to remind members that they have a legal duty under the public sector equality duty as set out in section 149 of the Equality Act 2010 to have due regard to three key aims when exercising your functions, including setting the budget. Clearly, your recommendations are going to go to full council, and full council will need to consider the same things. So the three key aims are: 1, eliminating discrimination, harassment and victimisation; 2, advancing equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and those who do not; and 3, encouraging good relations between people who share a protected characteristic and those who do not. So, to fulfil this duty in setting the budget, it is essential that members conscientiously consider the impact of budgetary decisions on individuals with protected characteristics such as age, disability, gender reassignment, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. This involves having regard to potential disadvantages, addressing the specific need of affected groups, and potentially taking steps to mitigate any negative impacts where possible. So, equality impact assessments are not mandatory under the Equality Act, but they do represent good practice in documenting the consideration given to the public sector equality duty. As a council, we follow this good practice, and the cumulative equality impact assessment for the budget is found at Appendix I in the report on page 127, which explains the potential equalities impact on the decisions to approve the budget. Paragraph 7.9 of the report contains a link to more detailed individual equality impact assessments. This duty to consider equality issues cannot be delegated, meaning that members cannot simply rely on officers' reports or assume that the duty has been fulfilled. Members must actively consider the information provided, including any consultation, and ensure that your decisions are informed by a fair summary of how the public sector duty is being fulfilled. So legally, members must ensure that equality considerations are important considerations in your decision about the budget, and you must consider them alongside other issues as well. And therefore, that's why it's noted in the final recommendation of the budget report that you have considered those that duty. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. We'll turn to the recommendations in due course. Can I just say right from the start, please, that we've got that section 25 assurance statement from you, Gary. Can I now open it up for discussion, please? Who'd like to go first? Sam.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thanks to Gary and his team and Gareth for producing a very comprehensive and transparent budget. And I would like to thank Nick, Harm, Andrew Rowe, Joe Ireland, and all the officers in my portfolio for bringing about savings of between 11 and 13% across my portfolio without any cut to frontline services. I'm very proud of the work they've done to see that we still deliver leisure, in the arts, libraries and the archive, without cutting those services and whilst making savings. I think all of us in this room regret the fact that the savings that have been affected by this council and the savings that were made by local government reorganisation and continue to be made and will be made for many years to come have not resulted in what I know the leader and those who were in favour of local government reorganisation intended, which was that there would not be the need to increase council tax by the max. And that were it not for the cost pressures in various services and the cuts made to our funding by central government, we would be passing a very different sort of budget, and that our residents would see the benefit of the savings that this council has made. Unfortunately, they now only see the benefits in terms of the fact that although we are relying on reserves this year and perhaps in the medium term we are financially solvent because of long-term prudence. We're not going to the wall like councils all over the country. We're not cutting frontline services. We're investing ambitiously in some things. As you know, we have a plan for investment in our leisure centres. The new super mobile library is out and about in North Yorkshire. Considerable investment by this council is making more stops. So there is good news, despite the sometimes the feeling of gloom. So thank you to all the officers concerned for helping us to achieve this. As I said, Leader, across my portfolio, savings of 11 to 13%. I would like to hear from those in Whitehall who advise government that the best way of saving money is to give less to rural local authorities like ours. What departments in Whitehall have made savings of 11 and 13% in the last year?
Thank you, Simon. Who'd like to go next? Jan.
Thank you, Leader. Gareth, both thank you for your report. It was, for me, quite an easy read, which usually means there's an awful lot of work gone on behind that to make it accessible to people that probably don't have your financial qualifications. So thank you for that. You've already drawn attention to this, and so has Gareth. Point 3 of the executive summary, but as portfolio holder, I just have to endorse those comments around the £15 million of growth which has been provided for the high needs placements. It's just an eye-watering amount, and it's something we share both locally and nationally. So we're all in it together here. And I'd like to draw attention to page 25 under 3.1.2 onwards. And I'll be brief over this because we've done it to death, really. I don't think anyone is unaware of the pressures around SEND. We know that government are aware of the problem, and we're told that they intend to address this imminently in spring this year. I'm really concerned that deadline keeps getting put back. We really need now some clarification over that, and I await these reforms with bated breath, as I think we all do. Thank you.
Annabelle,
thank you. If I could just add to Janet's, but also can I add my thanks to Gary and the team for all the hard work that you've done with this. It's been an immense piece of work, and also to the children's services who have helped supply those savings. But just to reiterate that at the Schools Forum meeting in November last year, the Schools Forum took the very difficult decision to approve 0.5%, which equates to about 2.4 million, to transfer from their schools block to the high needs block for the financial year 26-27. So I'd like to thank the Schools Forum, because this decision reflects the severity of the pressure on high needs funding locally. All mainstream schools are under intense financial strain, and it was recognised that without this mitigation, this transfer places further burden upon them. And we must continue to support our schools, remembering that North Yorkshire is one of the lowest funded authorities in England for high needs. It's ranked 146 out of 151 authorities for funding per head. And that means we're receiving about £797 per head, compared with authorities receiving over 1,700 per head. And the F40 group, of which we are part in North Yorkshire, lobbied Parliament yesterday in regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle.
A couple of things. I can't just let it go. The amount of money the government has taken off of us, Leader. I'm sorry, but to lose over £40 million over the last couple of years, I do not see how they think we can do anything other than raise council tax by the maximum amount. And I'll be honest, if the question had come to me as a member of the public, do you want the council tax to be raised, then my answer would be no. And when I came into politics, it wasn't to raise council tax for people. In fact, quite the opposite. But we really have no choice this year but to raise it by 4.99% for the reasons already stated. And I'm afraid that we could be in a very similar position next year, because you cannot keep on losing money from central government. And central government really needs to have another look at rural needs, because anybody who thinks it doesn't cost more to run services in a rural location like ours versus, let's say, Waltham Forest, which is the area I grew up in, frankly, has never been outside London in their lives. A couple of other points about my area, and I'm going to also pick up on something that Gareth said earlier. He seemed surprised that Reform Council say one thing and do another. I've no idea, Gareth, why you would think that, because as night follows day, it was obvious they couldn't fulfil their manifesto promises in the various locations. I also noticed that Kent have now started to employ SPADs at the cost of over £100,000 a year. We employ nobody and it costs us nothing a year, so it's a little bit of a difference. The other thing I want to say is that my work area has saved something like 12% this year, so very similar to Simon's. And I'm pleased with that because we've made savings despite the fact that we bring money into the council and we haven't hit any frontline services. And I believe in the coming year, we will continue to see more money come in for economic development. And we've also seen an increase in planning fees and the amount that we bring in via that. So that's been a success. Finally, on harbours, whilst we are seeing less money in the general fund because of the Whitby ruling, I have to say that we spend more money on the harbours than we get in. So actually, it was a Pyrrhic victory for those who wanted to do that. So with a slightly heavy heart, I'm going to support the budget today because I don't want to see increases. We have no choice. And I will echo what everybody has so far said to Gary and his team. A very big thank you and well done for the work you've done and for the fact that we are not one of those councils who are writing to the government to tell them that we're in financial trouble. And that's because of prudence, both in the last 3 years and the years before that as well, Leader.
Thank you, Mark. Just for the benefit of anybody in the public listening in, Mark, can you just explain what a SPAD is that you referred to?
Yeah, it's a political appointment who helps the leader or the mayor, and they work on a political basis and are paid, in my view, quite significant salaries. North Yorkshire Council employ no such person, but I do notice a lot of surrounding authorities do employ such people, as does our mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mark, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo my colleagues' comments. Thanks to Gary and his team for the report, which was my first time as an executive member. Was an experience, but I found it easy to read. Thank you for that. And also, I'd like to thank Carl and his team in the environment for the support they've given in preparing the budget for us. It's been particularly challenging, the highways role. We are England's largest county with just under 8,000 miles of road, which presents significant challenges. But notwithstanding that, we have still been able to find £2.812 million worth of savings for this next financial year without impacting in too big a way on the frontline services. So I'd like to commend the team for the support and coming up with those savings. Be under no illusions, next year will be equally, if not more difficult. But I think it's a good outcome for the department and also for the highways network across North Yorkshire.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Can I bring Councillor Harrison in now, please, from the screen? Michael, please.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to highlight from a health and adult services perspective, first of all, I recognise that it's another year that we are levying the adult social care precept, and I don't take that for granted. It's worth noting that we've never had a problem in justifying that the amount that we raise on that precept is spent on adult social care. We have to do that as part of our responsibilities, but what we spend is well in excess of what we precept for. Over the course of many years, we've always had a risk that there's a number of funding streams that feed into adult social care, and there's always been a risk that one or more of these funding streams could disappear. I can see that the government is simplifying some of these funding amounts, but there does remain a risk that as we've seen through fair funding, we may lose out in the longer term on some of these. So it is worth bearing that in mind as we raise the adult social care budget alongside the savings that we're committed to making. One thing I would say though is if we look at prevention, this council can do so much. We do a lot, but we could do so much more if we had sufficient funding to help from a public health prevention perspective. And my plea would be certainly to central government and to our local integrated care boards that the NHS considers how as they redesign their services and as they reform, how much funding can they put towards prevention that would relieve some of the pressure on NHS services, and the council can really play a key role in that, but the money has to come to allow that to happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Health, please.
Thank you, Leader. I must admit, the equality implications paragraph 7.3.1. I'd just like to know how looking into the additional compounding factors such as the rural nature of the county and the cumulative impact can be addressed by central government, because I know we have to take it into account, but are they? I go to my parish councils and I explain, as I did last night, that I would unfortunately have to support the increase of 4.99, and they understood entirely why. And the Let's Talk Money survey is very useful. I mean, over 77% said that they would support council tax rises of one way or another. But if we want to fulfil the priorities of the council, we need to be able to have the funds to do it. And I think on the long term, we have that. On my parish councils, they want to see roads improved. And I explained about the cuts to Councillor Taylor's budget, and they were appalled. It's extremely difficult to explain to someone why their potholes are still potholes. But if government doesn't govern apart from W1, then unfortunately there's not a lot we can do about it. But we are doing our best, and there has been stated before, council tax reduction scheme is very important for the most vulnerable people. And I've always, when I was on borough level, been a very important part of the committee that decided that. So I'm vastly encouraged that we haven't done what other people have done and reduced that support. So yes, support this amount, and hopefully maybe they'll get some people in Westminster who actually understand rural counties, and maybe the unfair funding in a few years' time may change. Thank you.
Richard, please.
Yeah, just to say, especially on the waste side of my portfolio, we continue to make big changes. We continue to align, but that does continue to bring savings in. So we're looking at about 1.4 million across our directorate, which is, thanks to the officers and everybody for looking at that. But I can see future savings as well there, as we bring the council together and align those services. So it's not like we're just looking this year. There is future plans in place to align all our services and make sure all our residents are available. That's probably the one service that everybody gets. Once a week, a bin wagon turns up outside your house and empties one of your bins, and that's important to a lot of people. And that is how we're intending to keep it that way into the future.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Anybody else want to come in? Gareth, come in at the end. Okay, Gareth, do you want?
So I think we've got consensus around the table about the reluctant need to increase council tax by the 5%. I just want to make 3 or 4 points, if I may, really reiteration. We have put more money into people's services, especially CHIPS, and I think the challenge will start to CHIPS. If I'm being honest, we've wiped the slate clean in general terms, but there will be some scrutiny over the next 12 months at that sort of investment that we're putting in. I'm hopeful that with the arrival of the new director, we may be able to see some return on that investment. So in my view, that is the focus for the next 12 months. I want to touch on reserves, and I suppose it's tied into a point that Simon alluded to about some of the investments we're making. We're able to make 100 million quid's worth of capital investment that'll generate further revenue savings, provided the business cases stack up, into things like care hubs and our leisure investment strategy. We're still able to do that on a one-off basis because of the financial grip that Mark alluded to been deployed over the last decade or so. That will still leave us with reserves, and nothing else changing, of about £48 million at the end of the 3-year plan. And that will keep us going, we predict, for another year and a half, 2 years. So we have time to deal with the ongoing deficit. But I also want to remind people, and I'm back to Dr. Gloom again, there are too many risks and too many variables for us to sit back and not keep tight control of those budgets. If we look at SEND, there's a bit of hope there. But I asked a question before we come in today. What would happen to our treasury management income if, say, interest rates fell, base rate fell by 1%? That, in isolation, I know there's other implications for it, will give us just short of a £6 million hit on our revenue budget and expected returns. So there are risky elements as we look forward. Finally, in terms of the question that Michael asked about, I think it was a question about prevention. I know Gary will want to respond to that, but he's absolutely right. We need to secure funding or release funding somehow, but we can't do it in isolation. It's got to be in partnership with the NHS. And we need to look at that business case in terms of investing in things like prevention. But Gary might want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Gary, please.
Thanks, Chair. There's just a couple of things if you don't mind, I just wanted to come back on. So first of all, thank you for the thank yous, but I just want to record my thanks. I've been supported superbly well by my team. I have a great team who do this work, but also, as everyone's identified, this is Team North Yorkshire in action, actually, because this is across all of the council, support services and frontline services all working together to deliver these services, these savings, and the whole budget programme. So I am grateful to colleagues. Before I just come on to the prevention point and investments, I just wanted to pick up a point because I didn't make this abundantly clear. I think it's there in the budget report, but it's probably more implicit. So I accept that for the public, sometimes this is confusing and people would be looking at this. I thought there were savings, but a £25 million deficit at the end of 28-29 without local reorganisation would be a £93 million deficit. That's the £68 million and the 25 million would be £93 million. This council has been good at delivering services, delivering savings. I'm not sure without LGR it could have delivered £93 million for savings by that time. So I think we need to recognise the value of LGR in that. In terms of it was a point that Simon had made. I acutely aware that sometimes this can be gloomy, but actually, Gareth made the point. There is over £100 million worth of investments in care and support hubs, leisure investment strategy, and I have no doubt at all we'll need to make further investments, capital and revenue, in such things as helping to deal with high cost placements in children's, for example, and there'll be further extra care provision probably. There are a number of areas which are preventative in nature that we'll need to make. And the way that we can do that is exactly as been described, through the use of one-off investments. And if we get on top of the savings, that means we don't need the reserves, which means we can make those investments. So the two go hand in glove. It is a virtuous circle. So we need to keep on that push, and then money can be used productively rather than wastefully. If we buy time, that's okay. But if you can do something today rather than putting it off to tomorrow and save those reserves, then you can invest it. In terms of prevention funding, that plays in. As I said, if there are other prevention suggestions that come forward and require some pump priming, but there is a clear business case and there is an opportunity to test that out, because not everything works. You've got to be prepared to test things out sometimes. Then that can happen. And I would certainly expect the council to be coming forward with more ambitious plans over the next 12 months, some of which will include demand management, some of this will include about how we reconstruct our back offices, and some of it will be customer-facing changes to improve the experience and the efficiency of the organisation. So rest assured there will be some ambitious plans that do come forward, and prevention can certainly feature strongly in that.
Okay, thank you. Right. Unless there's anybody else wants to make a comment, we'll move to the recommendations. This section of the report. It's 2.5 pages, more or less, of recommendations there. I'm told that we can do them on block, unless anybody has a particular interest or concern about any one of the paragraphs in there. So can I just ask around the table, anybody got any concerns about any of the paragraphs that make up the recommendations? Sin shakes of the head. So in that case, Gareth, would you like to move recommendations 13.1, all the little bits?
Yes, just move them on block, formally moved.
Okay, and I'm happy to second that. So, because this is the most important decision we've ever taken in the course of the year, can we have a show of hands, all those in favour? I'm sorry, can you just wait a minute? Mr. Khan is nudging me.
Well, sorry, sir, you just said 13.1. I assume
Assuming we're going on to 13.2. Yeah, okay. You've got us well trained. Okay, so all those in favour of all the little points in 13.1. Thank you. That is unanimous. Can I now ask you, Gareth, if you would like to move 13.2?
Formally move.
Thank you, and I'll second it. So again, can we have a show of hands on that? Thank you. And then finally, 13.3, Gareth.
Formally move.
Yeah, I'm seconding it. Again, a show of hands, please, on 13.3. Thank you. Right, can we now move on to the other parts of the report? And Gareth, would you like to introduce the capital plan?
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief indeed. It's as printed. There are risks with any capital plan and any capital project within it, but I don't know whether Gary wants to add anything to that.
If I may, Chair, I'll be a lot briefer on this one. But I think it's important that we don't gloss over the capital plan. It shows £778.9 million of investment and actually picks up some of the priorities that you have highlighted collectively, such as care and support hubs, leisure investment, etc. This report is now set out in line with the 4 capital boards that we have. So there's been a change in governance over the last 12 months. And the report includes details updating on a range of schemes, including Transforming Cities Fund, the Levelling Up Fund project in Keckskill, Housing Revenue Account, Housing Provision, Care and Support Hubs, and Harrogate Convention Centre are all mentioned in there. I don't intend to do anything more than flag them. Happy to take questions if there are any. The one area I wanted to flag to you is there's a proposal to invest 1.1 million on Filey Brig Caravan and Camping Site, which is set out in paragraph 4.8.4 or page 244. And that pays back in 6 years and delivers a revenue stream thereafter. So similar to what I was saying earlier about return on investments. Final point I would make is, as I alluded to earlier, capital resources remain tight given demands. And we intend to carry out more work on what the strategic priorities are in the year. And some of that will see a firming up in terms of our rationalisation programme post vesting day and Loughborough reorganisation, and some further work on prioritisation and an attempt to rationalisation to go hand in glove with trying to put more money into the areas that we do best because they are required for frontline services. So I would expect more work to take place on that over the next 12 months. And of course, I'll bring that detail to the executive probably through the normal quarterly reports process. But happy to take questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Anybody got any questions, any comments? If not, Gareth, would you like to move recommendations?
Yeah, I'll formally move the recommendations as printed.
Okay, I'll second it. Again, show of hands, please. Thank you. And now can we move on to Treasury Management? Page 253. And I just wonder whether Councillor Harrison wants to make his usual declaration of interest. Michael,
Yes, thank you, Lydia. I realise that I'm not voting today because I'm remote, but in the interests of transparency, I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest in this item, as my employer is listed in the Treasury Management papers, but I'm relying on a dispensation granted by the Standards Committee to remain in the meeting, and ordinarily would have voted.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
So, Gareth, would you like to introduce this?
I'll just formally introduce it. I think, again, it's as printed. I could go on and bore everybody for hours, but I shan't.
Okay. Anything you want to add, Gareth?
I did just very quickly, Chair, to just make sure that members understand it's an annual update. We're required to do this, and we need approval of a number of documents: Treasury Management Strategy, separately Prudential Indicators, and the Minimum Revenue Provision Policy Statement. Ask me questions on it if you wish. You may not like the answer. You may find it rather tedious, but I will answer it. Borrowing Strategy, Investment Strategy, and Capital Strategy. What I would say to members, there are no fundamental changes, any of that. If there were, I would absolutely bring them to your attention.
Anybody got any questions or comments on this? If not, Gareth moves the recommendations.
Formally move.
Okay, I'll second them again. So again, show of hands, please. That'll be favour. Unanimous. Moving on then to the housing revenue account. Simon, are you introducing this, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader. As colleagues know, the process of LGR as far as council homes is concerned has involved a great deal of work for Nick, Andrew and their team, because it coincided with new standards from central government and the creation of the regulator of social housing. We self-declared because we knew that we were unable to meet standards in terms particularly of data, and without data, of course, you can't have any assurance as to the safety or the decency of the houses that you're letting. So we've embarked on a very ambitious programme of integrating data, getting data where we didn't have it, and effecting repairs and capital works. And the 30-year plan involves some £260 million worth of investment in existing stock. On top of that, we have things like the Warm Homes Fund, the decarbonisation monies that were made available by central government. We received £21 million in the last wave of that. We're match funding that with £19 million of our own money to deliver substantial improvements to our worst performing properties over the next 4 years. But all this creates a problem with capacity, because the need for us to improve our housing is now. And we have moved from what historically may have been reactive maintenance to proactive maintenance. And that means, as you will see from the budget, that there's actually a dip this coming year where we will have to draw on our own funds to the tune of £800,000. Situation will soon right itself, but it's a question of front loading the work that we have to do. I'm assured, I know Gary will foster, Nick, Andrew have done a lot of work on this, of the financial robustness of our HRA, both in terms of maintaining properties, in terms of improving properties, and then in terms of our capacity to deliver new properties, which was one of the early ambitions of this council. So as you'll see, a slight dip in there. And then the only other bit that I'd probably highlight, leader, and it's always a matter of concern, is the question of rent increases in the coming year. There were 4 years between 2016 and 2020 when government policy dictated a 1% per annum decrease in council house rents, which cut the core budget of the house revenue accounts across the UK. And that was a departure from what historically had been the situation, which was annual rent increases of CPI plus 1%. We have now got from central government an assurance of a 10-year policy of CPI plus 1% maximum rent increases. So members will see in the figures and the appendices to the report what the long-term benefit of us trying to catch up by increasing council rents by the maximum this year and perhaps in the short term is, in terms of our capacity to deliver improvements, in terms of our capacity to turn round voids as the bane of our lives, the properties sitting empty when we people has waiting this. Because at the end of the day, I think it's very important that people remember this, that the council homes are paid for by council tenants. They're not paid for out of the general fund. They're not paid for out of our council tax. They're paid for by council tenants. And our ambition has to have a council stock, which is of decent homes quality, which people can afford to live in and afford to eat, and to increase the capacity of the council to deliver new homes, addressing the unaffordability gap that is particularly pertinent in North Yorkshire, as we know. And so it's very important that the housing revenue account has the capacity to deliver. But it's for that reason that I will be moving in the recommendations the increase in council tax, in council rents of 4.8% this year, which is CPI plus 1%. And an increase of 2% to be applied to shared ownership rates from the first day. That's the justification for it. It's the only way, in fact, which we return to a decent balance with any alacrity, rather than fiddling about for the next 20 years, struggling to make the budget work. So it is essential at this stage. I regret the increase in cost of tenants, of course. But our ability to continue to deliver for tenants is essential. That's all I would say. It's probably quite enough, leader. They can fill in the gaps.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sam. And I open it up for any discussion. Mark, please.
Just briefly, I'm supporting the recommendation, Simon, and it's very important to point out that the money we're getting in here is making improvements to the council stock that we have, which is only a good thing. And I would just reiterate something that you mentioned, really, but it is important that where we can, we bring properties back into use as soon as possible. There are a few in my ward that sat empty for a while, and obviously that's disappointing. They're particularly bungalows for elderly people, and I'm sure there's people that would like to move into them. I also want to make the point, Simon, that whilst it's a 4.8% increase, when you compare it to the cost of renting from anybody else, it's still a very good rent, shall we say. I know in the Selby area, the difference between renting a council house and renting a private one, I mean, you can double the money to pay for a similar private one to the ones from the council. So it's good that the money goes back into improving those properties, making them better for the people living there. And whilst 4.8% is quite a lot, it is only just to make the properties better. So I'll be supporting it and pleased to hear that we're doing more and more to bring all properties back into use. Thank you.
Mike, Heather, please.
Thank you. I think it is important to remember that we may have these legacy properties, and there has been a backlog of maintenance, etc. And we also have to bear in mind that we're going to have more responsibility now under the legislation that's going through regarding protecting the tenants, and to make sure that we're able to effect repairs in a timely basis. And I think that's only fair that we show some responsibility. And this is a pragmatic way of saying, yes, we understand that, and we know we're going to have to put your rent up, but there are reasons why we're having to do it, and it will protect the investment that the HRA makes in the long term. So yes, I think it's the eminently sensible thing to do.
Okay. Anybody else, or can we turn to the recommendations? Nick.
Thank you, Lee. Just to add just a couple of small points, because Simon's covered nearly everything on there. I just wanted to set out that when Simon referred to the investment in capital, that's at Appendix C, setting out £243 million of capital investment. And one of the key things that executive need to be aware of is that legally we're required to set a positive position on the HRA, which Appendix B sets out that over the 30-year life of the plan, a 261 million headroom position. We will require borrowing during the life of this plan, but any borrowing against existing properties will be paid back as soon as able to do so. And the final point I just wanted to raise was with recommendation C, where it mentions rent convergence. The government is still consulting on how rent convergence will be applied. We've therefore taken a prudent midpoint position of £1 a week, but the consultation does include £2 or £3 a week. And this recommendation just sets out that we'll go with what government permits us to do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Anybody else want to come in before Richard?
Just briefly, we've all seen the global sort of energy prices fluctuate massively, and that has impinged quite a lot on some of our tenants. So a lot of this work, I know, is going to mitigate against that. So at least this is something we can control, as opposed to for our residents. So I'm fully supportive of this and moving forward and getting our houses up to a very, very good standard, which I know that's the plan.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? If not, Simon, I think you've already moved the recommendations, and I think they've been seconded.
I'll second it, Chair.
Yeah. So again, can we have a show of hands, please, those in favour? And that again is unanimous. So I think that completes that section of the agenda today. Can we now move on then, please, to agenda item 6? And Richard, can I come to you to introduce this, please?
Yeah, we were tasked with setting up a local nature recovery strategy document. This is it. It includes us, York, and our partners in the national parks. It really is a map of where we've got good local nature, where we're improving our local nature, and where we've got big gaps where we ought to be doing something in that. I think it exists now. We know we need to improve in certain areas. What we've got to remember is that most, not all, but most of this land is in private ownership. Most of this land is being farmed. And we need to also remember that how the farming and protected landscapes, the money has been extended for 1 year. So that's probably the areas where we've currently got good nature. So within our national parks, But outside of that, the government hasn't really come up with any money about how we're going to deliver this. And also there isn't a long term, even in the areas where we have got good nature recovery. So not only have they been attacking farms at one end, as in the sense of the future of those farms, there's also not really anything there in the environmental side into the future. And they really do need to set a plan out to the government now of how we're going to deliver these things and protect our farms and our farmers, because as it stands, that doesn't exist, and it needs to come through pretty quickly, because otherwise these things, we'll have a document sat on the shelf, but this is never going to get delivered without us supporting our farmers to help them deliver this. And that is financial support mainly. Farmers don't work on a we can suddenly change things. You plant a crop, it takes a while to grow. You want to lamb, it's 6 months, 5 months before that you put the tup in. So we need our farmers to understand, and we need them to know now, so therefore they can start delivering this in the future. So I think, the document's there, but now we need the backing from government to start delivering this.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody got any questions or comments, Janet?
Yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting read, actually. And I noticed it says 70% of the area is actually farmland, which is what you said. And the comment at 6.4, I think you've partly covered it, awaits any potential forthcoming announcement on funding for coordination of this, as funding as yet to be announced. So are we expecting some funding to come in from government? Because you've intimated that we might get something, but what's the bottom line on that?
The idea was that this would be backed by funding, so
but we haven't got any as yet,
and nor is there any sort of especially in the area. Farming and protected landscape funding is there this year. There's no funding for our big areas. Are the walls basically where the big arable farms and stuff like that, where we need to start doing nature recovery, and there is no sign of any funding for that at the moment. Is the Carl, or is something come through?
I think there's two things. There's funding to actually help deliver something on the ground, working with landowners and farmers. The other is about our partnership role in terms of leading on the LNRS. So we've had funding for that, which has supported the team. Still waiting confirmation of that going forward. And in the fullness of time, there will be a debate around who becomes the delivery partner for this document, because it was already originally envisaged that the combined authority at some point will take that over. That's looking like that's going to be more of a medium-term aspiration now. So the first call for us is really to get the money to be able to support the team to continue to deliver the document going forward. But ultimately, the government needs all these strategies to align to support a changing way in which we manage our land and nature going forward.
And also, you say that for farmers, it's only advisory. So, have we got any teeth there? Is it showing the carrot, or do we have a stick?
Well, there is a bit of that, but also this needs to feed into the local plan as well, in terms of what we designate land for and the planning policies that we have as well. So, a lot of it is to do with partnership and working together, rather than as having been able to dictate how people use their land. But clearly the local plan is, I suppose, a bit of a carrot and a stick as well.
So if you say it's partnership and working together, where do you see the parishes, individual parishes, fitting into that overall strategy?
Well, they're one of our partners, and we'll need to have close relationships with those going forward, as we have done in terms of the consultation and getting to this point with the document.
Thank you.
Okay, can I bring in Councillor Haslam, please?
Thank you, Chair. I very much welcome this document. I'd like to just say that I also endorse the fact that it does need the farmers to be involved, and they will need support, not just cheering on. So I subscribe to that. I think a couple of things that are going on, that we also need to involve Yorkshire Water with this very much as a partner in this, so our ability to convene as a council. And also the combined authority has money set aside to do this. And in fact, they've actually got going to their next meeting, I believe that you'll be at, Councillor Les. There is actually a Grow Yorkshire change, and obviously that is also an important part of this. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for the report, and also thank you very much for pointing out that it does, or at least Richard pointing out that it does need some financial support at the end of the day, because and it also needs longevity, as he points out, crops, farmers work on 5, 10, 15-year timescales. We can't just expect them at a drop of a hat. So I would hope that we could continue to keep pressure on central government to support, but also use our local resources in terms of the combined authority. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Anybody else? If not, Richard, would you like to formally move the recommendation?
Yeah, I better just to say thank you to Sean as well for the work that him and his team have done on this. It's been quite a large piece of work to go from nothing to actually having a document like this. So yeah, happy to move it, yeah.
Thank you, Richard. I don't think we need to have a show of hands on this. I think we just all agree that we publish this. It's a good read. It's a good document. Good. Okay. Can we move on then, please, to the next item, which is the forward plan? Heather, anything that we need to note?
Not particularly, but we do seem to have an awful lot on every agenda for the forthcoming executives. So it's going to be quite a busy time once the budget has been gently put to bed. We need to concentrate on other things.
Thank you, Heather. And you will see in due course that we're putting in an extra executive meeting on the 3rd of March. Okay, can we note that? That brings us to the end of the agenda. I mean, normally there's no matters of any urgency, but Simon, I think you want to bring us up to date on something to do with the National Year of Reading.
Yes, thank you, Leader. It is the National Year of Reading this year. We might perhaps go into it in more detail in due course, but there has been a noticeable decline in reading for pleasure amongst certain identifiable sections of the community, not least children from more deprived, disadvantaged backgrounds. So it's a real opportunity for us to promote reading amongst all for pleasure. Some of you will have heard Beedale Library on Radio 4 the other day singing the praises of libraries and what they can do to support people in their journey with reading. And as you know, the council already does a great deal to engage with communities in all sorts of ways. And as I've said, actually, we've kicked off the new super mobile library this year with new stops, more access for our more remote communities. So there's more to be done, and we want to engage across the council with all portfolios really in the council to see what we can do to take this opportunity to promote reading and how we can work together to do that, whether it's with schools and education or other areas. So it has been proposed that we make a resolution, and Barry, because he loves to, seems to think this should become something rather complicated and reports to council. I think Barry, do we need a report to say that we recognise the benefits of reading for educational attainment, well-being and social inclusion?
Just say it.
Should I get officers to write a 20-page report on that? Or can we take it as read? So perhaps I'm going to venture a little something here, Leader. Could we note that the government has designated 2026 as the National Year of Reading, supported by national partners and charities to encourage reading for pleasure? Can we recognise the benefits of reading for educational attainment, well-being and social and inclusion? Do we welcome and support the National Year of Reading and its campaign objectives and commit to working with our partners, including local libraries, schools, community groups, literacy organisations and businesses to promote reading across our communities. And can I request that you, the leader, on behalf of the council, completes the online pledge stating the actions the council will take. Now that bit I can understand. Maybe something that needs a little more input from us and officers, and report to yourself about exactly what the council is doing. So with the exception of that, which we might move at full council, can I ask my colleagues to say that we do recognise the benefits of reading, and we will do everything in our power to promote it this year? Is that all right?
I think if you read my email, you'd realise that I wasn't recommending it goes to full council in the first place.
No, you weren't. You did say something about a report.
Yeah, so like to read a report about the benefits of the reading. But yeah, so if what you've said there is what you have the ability to do as an executive member anyway, so you're just making that as a decision. I think so regards to the leader then responding formally to that consultation, you can do that taking the views of.
We'll get a report to you about what we're intending to. He'll send you a written response which you can read.
So we've got some clarity there. Annabelle, did you just want to agree with that? So that we can
yeah, just also to highlight that our schools are very proactive with reading, and every year they have a reading challenge, the children, and over the summer holidays, who can read the most books and report back to them. So we are very proactive with our reading. But yes, of course, anything positive to support that is wonderful. Thank you.
Nice. Excellent. I look forward to it.
Nobody else wants to come in now. So now I bring this meeting to a close. Thank you for your attendance and contributions.
Thank you.